Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host, joined by my blue collar badass. And as you've guessed it, it's just going to be Matt and I today. Spin it up. So, Matt, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Dylan. It has actually been quite a while since just you and I sat on the mic, so I'm looking forward to just having an old school chat today.
It is quite nice, man. And like I'm in my new office and finally getting everything set up and good to go. And it's nice to like just sit and have a conversation. Like I'm not necessarily in front of my computer, right? Doing this. It's such a nice feeling to like be able to, I don't know, like I feel like we're always in an office chair or having conversations like that these days. I mean, I do a ton of calls with, friends and others on like walks and stuff, but to actually like have more of I feel like a relaxed conversation, even though like I'm 6 feet from my other chair, right? Just being in a different little environment, if you will, is pretty cool.
Yeah, man, you've inspired me to tweak my studio out here a little bit because part of what we do kind of sucks, right? You're in California, I'm in Michigan. We can't easily physically sit in across a little podcast table and actually do this face to face. So this is what we're left with. So I do the same thing as what you've always done. Is I'm at my home office slash studio, but I'm still sitting at a damn desk with computer monitors all around me, and I'm sitting in my desk chair, and it's fine. I mean, whatever. We've been doing it for 2+ years like this. It works. The quality's fine. Blah blah blah. But it just like you said, at some point, like I just get annoyed sitting here. Right? I'd rather be sitting. I'm looking at I got a couch and a lazy boy and a different table. I just got to figure out how to take all the components and kind of stretch them away from my actual working space.
Yeah, I mean, I created two setups for this, but this is like the bigger thing, right? Is like I worked at a kitchen table for years,
Yeah.
right? Like, I work in airports or hotel rooms or wherever, right? Like I've done trainings like with people in my car, right? Pulled over in a parking lot. Like we've all done this, and especially in the construction world, right? Like most guys work out of their pickup truck. The like F-150 Limited has that damn flip out deal from the center console specifically for a guy to put a you know his laptop or work orders or clipboard, whatever,
Yeah.
on that surface, right? Like Ford purposely made that because they understand that the guy works in his truck, right? So like having an office or a dedicated space and like all that stuff is like I see it now as like a luxury, right? Like in having like those dedicated spaces, it makes things so much better. And just like nice to have, like we think about the cubicles and like how bland they are, but when you take a little bit of effort to make your space just like that much nicer, right? Like, and truth be told, this whole setup is like $1,000. So it's not like incredibly expensive, but it adds just so much more to it that I think, whether that's in your office, your home, wherever you're working, and most of you are working from home these days, like that little bit of, you know, just thought going into your space, right? Versus like, like I did, right? I'm just going to work at the kitchen table, or, hey, we're going to carve out, a spot in the corner of a spare bedroom to put a desk, or, hey, we're going to, now take over the whole spare bedroom, put, for the couples that are working from home, right? Like we're going to make this our office and, we're never going to have guests again, right? Like, they could stay at the motel down the street, like whatever that is, but a little thought and attention into that space and creating it however you want, right? Just goes a really long way. Which has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about, but it's just a cool little thing, man.
Well, it's the reality of what we live in now, right? I built this office next door to my house during the worst of COVID because I was sitting at my kitchen table and I'm like, this is bullshit. I own a construction company. I know how to build shit. I can get people to come help me. And so, granted, it's changed a lot since you've been up here a couple years ago, but it's still not finished, right? It's still this work in progress, and I keep adding stuff and moving things. And one of these days I'll grow up and and do what my wife has been yelling at me to do and actually just finish it and be done with it. But until then, it's always a, you know, another couple days type project.
Well, it just goes to like, yeah, and I think guys are mostly this way, right? Like you can live with a lot of stuff, right? That's just like good enough. And, you know, my wife, your wife, I think women in general like want that finished, space, that, thing to be complete, that project to be done with, where we can just live in it and it's fine. Like, can I get to my desk and there's a path to it? Like it doesn't matter how cramped I am or whatever, right? It doesn't matter if I'm working on an airplane or in an airport. Like, do I have my 2 feet of space around me to like write some notes and use my computer? And I think that goes just a lot to, we're in the mentality of getting it done most of the time and not necessarily like in the business of prettying it up. But that's also like why, for graphics and all that kind of stuff, like I need someone else to do it, because that's just not how my brain works.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like the shoemaker's kids have no shoes mentality too, right? Like, my Carrie will bark at me all the time, like, you're a builder. How is it that you can even function in this space that isn't fully built out and done? I'm like, I don't even see it. I put my blinders on. I come up here. I have a goal. It's just like driving to my other office. I don't pay attention to all the peripheral, right? I have a mission, and I am mission focused to everything I do. So I come up here and I'm boom. I get to my desk and I'm rocking and rolling. Like, did I walk past an area with no base molding? Maybe. I don't know. She comes in here for 15 seconds and it's like, holy hell, how can you even breathe? And that's a whole nother show, right? The difference between men and women. But I guess it's all glorified first world problems too. I'm bitching about my second office space and my cushy office next to my house that I can walk to in 45 seconds and complaining it's not done. So to each his own.
Right. Which, isn't going to be the perfect lead in, but I think goes to, a story you want to tell about uh, being in a meeting and some people maybe that listen to the show. So we'll give them another laugh.
Yeah, man. So I guess the moral of the story, we'll start with the end in mind. It's you never know who's listening and who's watching. And, I say this all the time to myself, frankly, and to my colleagues that have kids. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like, your kids are always watching. They're always listening, no matter what you're saying or where you're at, no matter how sneaky you're being. Kids are always watching you and they're always learning, good or bad. So, especially given what you and I do for I'll call it our non-professional lives here, right? We're not making any money on this shit. We do it for the enjoyment. We do it to try and bring a better good to the industry. We do it for a lot of reasons, but money isn't one of them right now. So I forget sometimes that, we are growing an audience too through this, whether it's through just the podcast or all the shit on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the social media content that, between the two of us, we're generating and putting out there on a daily basis. So it's not unoften that, I'll be in meetings or I'll meet new people and they'll bring up my LinkedIn content, especially. Oh, I follow you on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. And usually I just kind of blow it off. I'm like, oh, hey, thanks. Cool. I'm glad somebody looks at it, that sort of thing. Well, last week or week before, I don't really remember, but a colleague and I are in a meeting and it's a big fucking meeting. It's us, it's our client. We're at a municipality locally. So there's a supervisor, there's like directors of numerous different departments, there's brokers, there's a bunch of fucking attorneys. And the meeting starts off like ugly, right? Like the attorneys are beating on each other and there's barking and it was an uncomfortable situation for quite a while. And I don't mind the uncomfort, right? I've grown to get very comfortable in uncomfortable situations. That's how I can do what I do without losing my shit all the time. But we're kind of like coming to a lull in the conversation. You know, the lawyers have earned their fees and they've stopped fucking yelling for a little bit. And we're getting ready to pack up. And one of the directors in the middle of the damn meeting, you know, in front of everybody goes, "Oh, by the way, Matt, I love your stuff on LinkedIn. And I listen to the podcast all the time." And dude, my stomach like sank. And instantly I'm like reeling back in my head, like, oh shit. When was it that I had my little rant that I recorded on the way home from the planning commission meeting? When the hell did that post? Is it far enough away, far enough in the past that like maybe he hasn't heard it yet? And he didn't bring it up that specifically, but he started like quoting things and like talking about episodes that you and I have done and talking about shit that I've posted. And on the one hand, it's great because it means that all this work we're doing is starting to grab hold, right? It's gaining traction. Like we see it in our numbers, we see it in the downloads on the podcast, we see it in the views on LinkedIn and wherever. But on the other hand, it's like a giant oh shit moment. Like, all right, you know, I'm no Andy Frisella. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal even near that guy. But when you start realizing like people are listening to the shit that spews out of my mouth, it's almost terrifying, Dylan, because then I start going back and I'm sitting here in this meeting. He calls me out and like now everyone's looking at like, you do a podcast? What, you know, the attorneys are both like, what's a podcast? And so we're having that conversation and, you know, I'm just like reeling like, all right, when was the last time I said something truly offensive? I need to like start preparing for a rebuttal. And while none of that actually came up in the meeting, thank God, it's always there. So I guess, you know, I don't know where we're going to go with this quick episode, but I just wanted to touch on that. Like, you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching. So the best thing I could say is as long as you're speaking from the heart and you're being honest, you got nothing really to worry about. And truth be told, there's very few things I've said while we had the mics hot, at least, that, you know, I would be really, really nervous to defend myself on. Now, there's some that I would have to kind of take a step back and strategize before I reopened my mouth. But for the most part, like I say what's on my mind and, you know, you don't have to like it. It is what it is. But it was one of those moments professionally where I was like, oh, well, this could get interesting very quickly. So I don't know, man. I don't know if you've had that happen yet, but it was eye-opening.
Not specifically, right? But like I put out a lot of content. Like I write a ton. You know, obviously the podcast, other videos and stuff that I've done and put out. And so, and a lot of that for me is just like a free flow. Like I black out effectively. Like I don't remember shit that I said. It just flows out of me. And so, and that's when the best content comes out. Like you're in flow, like it comes out. And like, I don't know half the time the shit I say, but I know it's good and it's honest and it's what I feel. And this goes to like, you know, in that situation for you, I'd be like, well, shit, what did I say? You know, like, cause I frankly don't remember like half the time of what I said on a show or in a conversation. Like I talk to a lot of people, I say a lot of the same stuff, but you know, I think the bigger point here, and this is what I wanted to bring up, is like, if you're you in all situations, then you're you, right? Like whether they hear you on a podcast, see you on the street, you know, have a conversation with you in a meeting in professional setting, like if you show up on a Zoom meeting with a client or in person or whatever, if you're the same dude, right, and you're comfortable with who you are and the things that you talk about, right? Like I recently got into guns. It's not something I'm going to bring up out of the blue with somebody unless I know or whatever, but like that you care about it or, you know, you're cool with it, because
Right.
people react differently to like things like that, right? Like you're not going to bring up a lot of topics in mixed company, you know, that's just not what you do. But again, like I'm not going to be afraid to talk about it. If somebody wants to discuss it, it's like, okay, you know, sure, man, like I'm game. And so, but if you're cool with who you are and you're not, and you hold that same opinion and no matter the setting, like you shouldn't have anything to be afraid of, right? And I think this goes to the whole, are you comfortable in your own skin, in your own shoes, in like in that meeting, if you were like, an internet troll, and then you were, Matt in real life, right? Like, and those people did not like weren't the same, right? Then you'd have a problem.
Right, right.
It's just not good. But again, and this goes to like, by and large, man, most people are just that, right? You're probably going to be more aggressive like here on the show than you would be in real life, because you're not arguing against somebody. You don't have to like maintain that, but your true opinion is going to come out here. And then, it'll be more nuanced when you have a conversation. And that's how all of us are, right? Like when we're in company and with the people that agree with us, you're going to be much stronger in your view than like you having to go back and forth with somebody, and you're going to find that common ground. I think it just gets lost in society and like having these conversations, right? One, being open and like no one rebuttaling you, but two, like, not everybody has to go and like deal with lawyers and attorneys and like be in front of clients and like all these stakeholders that you have to, you know, kind of make happy, if you will, right? Like not just your client, but all these other people to get a project done. In construction, that's unique, right? We have like 20 people we have to make happy, not
Yeah.
just our client. And so to get a project done, and this is the reality of it, in like those conversations, you got to make everybody happy. But on the other side of it, like, that you still need to hold those opinions, like, right, like this would be the ideal outcome, but that's not always going to happen. So like, what is an acceptable outcome, right? And there's a gap between those two, but you're willing to accept certain terms, and then you're wanting better terms, like in everything. But again, I think that the core crux of this, and this is what I want to bring up, man, because you're comfortable with who you are, right? It's not a big deal when you go into those meetings. And I think a lot of people just need to find that voice, right? And it's in different contexts mean different things, like a few weeks ago I was at 3-7 Project and the Proving Ground with Chad Wright and the group there. And like I took I was more Indian, less chief, for that weekend, right? Like there were times that I stepped up to lead, but by and large, I let other people do that, right? So in different settings, you're going to take different roles. Sometimes you're going to lead, sometimes you're going to be led, sometimes you're going to want to speak up, sometimes you're going to want to hold your tongue, right? Like there's probably times at home hold that back a little more than you do in like other meetings, right? It's just but again, you have different battles, different wars that you're going to fight, right? Like different games. The goal of marriage is to stay married, right? The goal of business is to stay in business. The goal of a project is to get it done, right? And there's different battles and wars in each of those. And I think, context matters a lot to your point, right? Like it could be funny and lighthearted and all that kind of stuff. And like the joke of the lawyers earning their fees, in private, they know that, right? That's what makes it funny, is because it's true. That's why people like Chappelle and all these other, Chris Rock. I watched his special recently about the whole Will Smith slap and whatnot. Like it's funny because it's true, man. Like, and that's why like people laugh about this stuff.
Absolutely. And it just, it's this theme of personal development that I talk about a lot, right? And it's getting to the point, frankly, where you're open and honest with yourself as much as you are with everybody else, and you can have honest, direct communication. We always talk about ripping the Band-Aid off and just getting down to the crux of an issue. That's the best feeling, is when you can finally get to that point where I don't give a shit if you agree with me or not. Right? Even you sitting across, like, argue with me, tell me I'm wrong, and we'll have a discussion. But we'll both be open and direct. There's not going to be any dancing around topics. And like you said, yes, I may craft my verbal assault differently here on the mics than I will in a high stakes business meeting. I'll tamper down the pirate a little bit, at least in the business meeting, but by and large, I'm going to say the same content. I'm going to say the same shit because it is what it is. It's what I believe in. It's who I am, and it's how I'm going to do it. And once you reach that point where, and I don't want to be crass about it, but when you don't give a shit, things get a lot easier. And it's not to be like, I want to be an asshole or, or anything like that, but I don't need to be everybody's cup of tea. I don't care about that. Right. And frankly, doing the podcast has been a huge help for me personally. We're over 2 years in now since I've been co-hosting with you, and just the virtue of getting on a mic and having to talk and carry conversations with you and with guests and all of the above, it's increased my level of awareness, at least, and my confidence to just start talking and just say what's on my mind and not be so, people get really worried about how it's going to come off and how is this going to make me look. And, like I said originally, yeah, I was a little nervous when the guy brought up that he listens to the show, but then I realized, like, well, it is what it is. Yeah, he still listened. He, maybe he likes my shit now. I don't know, but if he wanted to talk about my feelings on planning commissions, we could do that. But you just got to be comfortable in your own skin.
Well, that's it too, man. Like, what people say and what people do are typically two very different things, right? Like, by and large. So, again, if they still listen, that means they like it, right? One episode, you may or may not tune in. If you start listening 5, 10, 20, regular listener, right? Anytime anything comes out, then like you're in, and so, like the perfect example, I have 2,100 people that subscribe to my like daily newsletter on LinkedIn, right? Everybody gets an email about it. I get like 3 people to like the post, but I know they all read it because they all get the email, right? Like and I mean, the same thing like for view counts, right? Like hundreds of thousands of people will see a given post and you get 10 people that like the thing, right? On Facebook or on LinkedIn, like that have comments or whatever. So like, you got to remember too, in anything that you put out personally, there's a lot more people that watch than react or engage.
Yes.
And you can see this across any given platform, right? There might be like a big celebrity, right? They might have, let's just say, 1 million likes on that, but they're only going to have maybe 100,000 comments, right? And of them, and like 20 million people follow them, right? And so probably 10% of that, see it, or maybe it's 30% for some of those guys. So if you have 20 million, and 25% see it, 30% see it. So what's that? Like 6 million people, right, would see the post, 1 million like it, and then 100,000 comment, right? Like that's the percentage of that stuff. So when you start to really like hammer down on it, there's a lot of people that view and watch and see the content, but the people that actually engage are kind of few and far between. And so that's important to keep in mind too, is you put your own content out there, you do a lot of this stuff, right? There's a lot more people like just watching and wanting to see that content before they do anything, make a decision. And, from other people that I've been around or seen, like there's guys that might never like, comment, share, nothing from a given post, but they'll go and spend $1 million with somebody just because they saw content. Like it's insane when you think about that, like spending power of having content. No, they never liked, comment, engaged, nothing, but they watched 200 YouTube videos or whatever, right? They listened to all the podcasts, they followed you on social, they saw your stuff, or enough to make a decision to want to do business with you. And in our world, in the construction world, client, and we were talking about this before, right? Even if you invested, let's say $25,000 in your brand over like 2 years, right? So $1,000 a month, let's just say 50 grand, and you got a client that pays you 5 million and you make 10% on it. So you spent 50K to make 500. Like you would make that bet all day, every day. The problem is like the stats, like the comments, like shares, the dopamine hits of like doing the thing are hard because you're probably not going to get any. But again, like if you got one client out of it over a long enough time horizon, it's worth it. And I think that's what we like end up forgetting is in our business, we need one client to make everything that we do worth it. And it is truly hard on a daily basis to remember that you need one, right? In our business, in our world, right? Like even in my world, right, of a software client, even if I spent 50 grand, over 2 years to get my name out there, promote stuff. And a lot of it is honestly, it's not, I don't even need to spend that much money. It's the time, effort, energy to like post on a free platform, right? Whether that's Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever. And okay, on that, I get a $50,000 consulting client to build custom software for them, and customize our solution over a year. Okay, that's one. And then they stay with me for 10 years and they pay for 10 grand in software a year for all the custom suite of tools that we built for 10 years. Okay, so customer cost of acquisition goes to like, okay, even say it's 50 grand. So I netted quote zero on the upfront, but I made 100 grand in profit on the back end, right? Like that's how the math works. But we don't think of like customer cost of acquisition, right? You don't think of like what it takes to put a proposal out or content or all the other pieces. Like you haven't monetized back to like day zero. I don't mean this to be like a marketing thing or like monetization point, but the whole point is like when you're comfortable with speaking your truth and like whatever that is, right? Your opinions on stuff, how you see the world, your processes, your views, your how antiquated you think committee meetings are, right? All this other stuff. Like saying that and speaking that means that when you go to work with a person, they already know who you are, right? You've already done all the hard work of saying who you are, what you believe in, what you stand for, all that stuff. And they just want to work with you. So you can, this is like the other hack. You can charge higher fees because they want to work with you, and you're going to keep them longer because they already want to work with you, right? So long as you don't screw it up in whatever deliverable you're doing, you will keep that client for far longer than if you never put out content.
Yeah. And yes, you're spot on, but so much of what I've realized too in the content world, like I'm not a marketing guy, I'm not a social media guy, right? I own a construction company, we build shit. But I made a conscious effort a few years ago to start writing content. Hell or high water, I'm going to put out X number of posts a week and see what happens. And we started building a following, we started getting more and more people looking at our shit. But to your earlier point about likes and comments, like I'm not the guy that's going to figure out the algorithm, right? I don't have the time or patience or frankly even desire. And it's real easy to fall in that trap, like you mentioned. Like what the hell's going on here? I'm dropping content every single day. I've got X number of people following me, but no one's hitting the damn button. And it took me a long time, and you actually turned me onto it. But like when you stop looking at the likes and the comments and you look more at the view count, and when you get into the analytics and you actually see who's seeing it, the numbers blow me away. It's like, okay, well now I can kind of flip that back and like I don't really care. You want to like it. If you don't. But I know I can tell you without beyond any shadow of doubt the reach I'm getting with every single post I write. LinkedIn especially is fairly decent with that. So, it's a numbers game. And again, one client is all we need. One client, one future employee, one partner, whatever it may be. We're not in the business of selling widgets, right? We're not an e-com genius, right? I'm not just pumping out piles of crap and building my net worth on volume of shit sold. It doesn't work like that in our world, right? I mean, most of our clients, we've talked about this before, most of the people that we work with at the construction company, we might work for them once. Now they do a hell of a lot for us as far as referrals go, and we work for a lot of their friends, but a lot of our clients are not massive conglomerate companies that are going to build something new every few years, right? If they're kind of like your school examples, they might build one building in their life, period. And if we can kick ass and build that for them, and then we can show people on social, on LinkedIn and whatever else, and then they, whether or not they come listen to the rants and raves here, it's all just that one big churning machine. And it is marketing, right? And you're way more in tune to the marketing world than I am, but everything we do is marketing. Everything you do is about sales. And it doesn't matter if you're a salesman by title, or if you're a project engineer or an estimator or an HR manager or a fucking janitor. Everything you do is sales at the end of the day, right? You're always selling something. And once you flip that mentality that like sales are bad and that like it's a scary thing, and realize that we're all selling, it becomes a lot easier, and becomes a lot easier to be authentic. At least it did for me.
Oh man, there's so much in that. This goes to show, like, one conversation, right, about being true to who you are can open up so many doors. We can take that in a lot of directions. I don't know where we are in time for this episode, but like the being who you are, being like having an opinion on stuff, but backing it up with experience is so important, right? Like Matt, you're more in touch with the game on a day-to-day basis than I am, right? Like I've taken a much bigger view of the industry as a whole and done it through software. But the conversations that I have right around processes, around how people work, around, like how do you get a 300,000 square foot project out the door in 2 weeks? Like, can you actually make that happen for like design documents? The answer is yes. However, right, like you now from a holistic viewpoint, like I take a $70 million project and I can crank it out in 2 weeks. Like that's a much different viewpoint than like you're blocking and tackling, which is what makes this great too. And I say blocking and tackling in like the aspect of, you're executing on your projects in your area, and that's how most contractors are, right? Like very few are like the McCarthy's of the world, or like the Ryan Holmes, or those guys that can take the 100,000 foot view of the industry and like the whole US, right? Most everybody, and this was me when I worked in a firm, right? Like I cared about, when I lived in Indianapolis, like I cared about the Indiana market, right? Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, where we did projects. Like I cared about those markets, what was happening in those areas. When I worked for healthcare, I cared about that healthcare system, right? Like I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care what was going on nationally. It did not matter to me. And so, like you have your 30,000 foot view of your world, right? And my world now is just at a much bigger level. But this goes to, it's nationally, really, it's globally, and like how you put a project together. But the basis of this is like speaking about like what your view and your experiences. But if you have no experience, and this is where I think a lot of people fall flat and like the whole social thing goes awry, is you're not talking from experience, right? Like you're not doing anything, either significant within your job, or not finding unique views on it, or you're not doing anything in your personal life, right? Like the things that I talk about in my daily newsletter is like about running, or the experience I just had at 3 of 7 and hanging out with a Navy SEAL for the weekend, right? And getting my butt kicked. I talk about like shooting and how like I'm learning a ton there, right? I talk about the construction industry and process and cash flow and like things that most people don't think about in their business, right? But all those things matter. But for you, like you can go and find something, right, that you're new to, that you're learning about, and talk about it, right? Like I talk about training for a 100-mile race that I haven't done. Like, okay, how's this gonna work out? Like talk about going and shooting and like how I've gotten better in that, which I'll save for the next episode. But like the the nuances in all this are, from experience, right? So like Matt, your experience in like how a project's going, like what went wrong on this, or man, we got like here, if I was building stuff, where I am in California, or even like in most of California right now, like we got 7 inches of rain in the last week, which for California is a lot, like things are flooded, and, like people are getting evacuated and all this stuff. Like, okay, well, how do you operate in that environment? And like, how do you, we're dropping in pumps and all, like whatever that is, right? Like it could be snow, it could be shut down, it could be the city, you know, did something, right? It could be a number of things, and how you got through it. Those stories are what allow people to navigate things themselves. They're what allow people to relate to you and how you handled it, right? So now the other beauty of this is that a client, if they listen to the show, they would know how you handle those situations whenever that's going to come up for them, right? And you're never going to do that in casual conversation. Like it's not, I mean, it might come up, but by and large, in like a proposal process or anything else that you end up doing, like you're not going to come up with like, oh yeah, no, this client over here, right? We don't say names, but like this client had a issue and like the whole basement flooded, and this is how we handled it, right? But if you go back like 10 years, the reason like Bjarke Ingels and the Big Group and like uh Prince and some of these other big name architects are big name architects is because they did media, they did TED Talks, they did all this stuff, and that's how they became the brand name, the Starchitect that they are, and command these massive fees for their designs. Like that's how they did it, guys. So but it took a long time for them to get their name out there. They had some awesome projects that they got to build, and that's how they become those guys, right? But it started with them putting up content on the internet.
Well, and it's all about them being authentic and being real. And you nailed it. Don't be a fake ass internet coach if you've never done it, right? You and I have both walked the walk to now talk the talk, right? I've built a lot of shit in my day, and you've designed a ton of stuff in your day. So we are absolutely qualified to come on here and spit some fire about these topics. Now, you won't find me giving anybody advice on picking stocks, or selling insurance, or because that's not my game. So just be real and don't try and force it either. That was the other thing that really was an eye opener to me. Like when I first started writing content for both myself and the company, it was like, man, this is hard. I can't think of anything. And I would sit here or sit in front of my computer somewhere for hours and do nothing. And I couldn't, like, it would just be this mind block. And, what am I going to write? No one's going to like it. What if nobody looks at it? And then something snapped. I was like, well, what if they do? What if they do look at it? And once you realize, like, it doesn't matter how many followers you have, whether you're at Frisella's level or you're just starting, like nobody truly gives a shit, right? You're not solving world problems with social media content. So as long as you're being true and authentic and you actually have a leg to stand on what you're talking about, just go and do it. And just, you can't be afraid of the outcome. It's no different than starting a business, right? You might fail, you might fall flat on your damn face, but you might make it, right? And you just got to do it. You got to be real. You got to be open. And I don't know, we could beat this one to death, I think, but it's just a matter of being consistent, being honest, and as raw as you can handle.
Yeah, and the two things I'll close with, man, is what happens like if you don't, right? Like what's going to happen if you don't do it? You're going to be exactly where you are, probably worse, right? So let's just be real with that. And then two, nobody cares, right? One of the things I saw recently was like the Queen of England died 6 months ago, and until now you did not think about her, right? If the fucking Queen, nobody thinks about her for the last 6 months,
Nobody's thinking about you or I, brother.
yeah, you really don't, like, nobody cares, right? So they care so long as it's there, but if you don't post, they might be like, man, what happened to that? And then that thought went away, right? They have the next thing to move on to. So I mean, you got to stay present, you got to stay top mind, all those things, but at the end of the day, nobody cares.
Yeah, most people are consuming your content while they're sitting on the toilet, and they're thumbing through their phone. And if something catches their eye, they might stop for, you probably know the actual data. I'm going to say it's 3 seconds. It's not very long, and then they're on to the next thing. Just boom, boom, boom. And if you want to really win at that game, you can't care about that, right? You can't care about the likes. You can't care about the comments. You just got to keep doing you.
Yeah, care about who you are, right? Care about who the people around you think you are, that know you in real life, like that actually know you, that actually have conversations with you. A lot of my friends, shit, I don't see them face to face, but maybe once a year, but I talk to them regularly. Like, Matt, you're one of them. I got a slew of other guys, that I talk to regularly, but I don't see them face to face, but a few times a year.
Right.
So you can have, those friends, but, people need to know you in real life, right? Like have real conversations with you that aren't, 140 characters long, you know, like that's what it amounts to. So care about what those people think. Outside of that, doesn't matter.
Yeah. And you're only doing yourself a disservice if you put on some false bravado, or you play a character in social media or on a podcast, right? Because when you do then end up meeting somebody, or somebody calls you out in a meeting, if you actually aren't that guy or that woman that you're portraying, then you look like a damn fool.
Yeah, that's bad. Um, so yeah, just in closing, for this episode, guys, like be honest, be truthful, be transparent to a point, like with your opinions, with your views of the world. You don't have to be personal. Like, and I think that's the other thing too. Like, you do not have to show your life, right? Like, you guys don't know where I live. You don't know anything that I don't want you to know. Right. And I think that goes for a lot of us is, you can help people, you can spread the word, you can be good about a lot of things. Just know that like you do not have to share what you ate for breakfast or any of that stuff. You do not have to be personal, right? Like just share the things that you know and the topics that you want to talk about and leave it at that.
100%, man. I talk about my family, I'll talk about my wife and my kids from time to time. You show up at my house, you better be invited though.
Yeah. Yeah. Trespassers will be shot once, survivors shot again.
Good
So,
deal, man.
all right, guys, be you. I mean, that's bottom line for this episode. Just be you. It'll pay off, and you'll find your voice. You'll find your ability to speak and communicate effectively to not only, the world and business, but also in life. And you'll have better conversations, better friendships, better relationships all the way around. Until next time.